Well, hello, folks out there in YouTube land. Got a big show lined up for you. Let's get right on into it. All right, folks, we're going to talk about Harbaugh's contract. Why he's got wild demands. Wait till I show you this stuff. And also, will Nico fix the Vols offense? We're going to get into all that. First of all, I hope y'all are not under about 6 inches of snow. We finally got some up here in the Smoky Mountains, but actually we were just south of that big line, so we only got a couple of inches down here in the valley. But I know Knoxville, Nashville, y'all got a ton. I know a lot of y'all are probably stuck at the house, so I got a video for you. Keep you entertained. First thing we're going to talk about is Jim Harbaugh and this contract. Wait until you see this article, and it tells you all about his demands. I got to take my hat off to this guy. He's in a position of strength, and he's going to enforce it. Wait till you see all this good stuff.
I want potato
You'll
chips.
get nothing and like it.
This is on Yahoo Sports by Dan Wetzel. It says Jim Harbaugh remains engaged in contract talks with Michigan amid NFL swirl. It says even as Jim Harbaugh meets NFL teams, he's still engaged in discussions with Michigan about a contract extension that includes unusual termination clauses should he choose to stay in Ann Arbor, according to industry sources. So some of these clauses, what do you hear all this good stuff? He has thought this through, or his attorney has. So listen to this. It says sources said Harbaugh is seeking language that would grant him immunity from termination from any finding or sanction that could arise from multiple current NCAA investigations in the program. He's also seeking a delay in the start date of the new contract to maintain a lower buyout so that NFL teams would have to pay a lower amount should they hire him away. The buyout is currently at 2.25, drops to 1.5 million January 11th. So that's already happened. Michigan is seeking to raise it to about 4 million in the new deal. He does not want the new deal to start until February the 15th, thus maintaining the lower and more favorable buyout number until after the NFL hiring cycle has concluded. So he's negotiating, but he's negotiating in a way that he can continue down this NFL path. So why are you even negotiating? I don't quite get that. But wait till you see this other stuff. You're talking about covering himself. It says Harbaugh is seeking a matrix of fines be spelled out if there are any future NCAA violations, as well as prohibiting the school's athletic director from firing him for cause. So the athletic director cannot fire him. I've never even heard of that. But let's go a little further. It says instead, that decision, should it ever arise, rests in a 3-member arbitration panel. I wonder if he gets to pick that panel. It says Michigan's already offered him a huge contract. I believe his original contract offer was 10 years, $125 million. But they've pulled that back to, I think, 6 years, and it says 11.5. I don't think he wanted to do a 10-year, which that would have had him coaching there until he probably retired because he's 60. Anyway, the 6-year deal is worth $11.5 million plus additional based bonuses. So he'd be the new Nick Saban, highest paid dude. It says while the financial terms between the coach and the school are either fully or mostly ironed out, the termination language remains a sticking point. I bet it does. It says Harbaugh and the football program are currently the subject. We all know that. Talking about the level 1 violation where he didn't tell them the truth about the cheeseburgers. I didn't think that was that big a deal, but NCAA will hammer you over that. If you don't treat them with respect and answer all their stupid questions, they're going to hammer you. Ask Bruce Pearl about that. Talks about the sign stealing that involved former staffer Connor Stallions, allegedly. Talks about his 3-game suspension, which he's already served 2. The first one was over the cheeseburgers, and they're not done with that because the NCAA wanted 4 games. Michigan gave them 3, so that's not over with.
It's over. Nothing is over. Nothing. You just don't turn it off.
And then on top of that, you've got the 3-game suspension by the Big Ten, but now the NCAA is going to be coming in, and they're going to do what they do, which if they gave him 4 games over a cheeseburger, shoo. He sought to have his contract grant him immunity from termination for any violation stemming from those cases. It additionally spells out any penalty he may face should the NCAA rule him responsible in any future case. That would include specific fine amounts for any level 1 or level 2 violation. He's also seeking to have any decision involving for-cause termination to be determined by the 3-member panel. So he is covering his rear end all the way around. Basically, the athletic director can't fire him for cause. He wants a panel, And he wants to know exactly what the fines would be now, not what they might end up being once they find out what all's happened. And it almost sounds like he's saying, look, even if you find evidence against me, I don't know what they will. We'll find out. But even if they do, you can't terminate him based on what's happened. That's what he's trying to get in the contract. Now, I understand trying to get a one-sided contract. This one doesn't even make sense because you don't even want it to start till February 15th. At this point, why even negotiate? It doesn't really make sense. This is getting pretty wild. But I tell you what, when you win a national championship, you can kind of push people around a little bit, which is what he's doing with Michigan. They want him to stay. And I'm starting to think if he's negotiating, maybe he wants to stay, but he doesn't want to get hammered by the school. So this is very intriguing. I've never heard of a contract like this ever for a head football coach. They're never allowed to put these type of stipulations in there. If I break the rules, you can't do anything. And if you do, well, here's what the little limits are. And I need a panel. Does he get to pick the panel? I would say he doesn't, but he probably figures the panel is going to be a lot easier on him than an athletic director would be. I'm going to tell you something. This whole Jim Harbaugh thing, it is as the world turns.
And now for the next 30 minutes, as the world turns.
Yep, it changes all the time. I've told you it's like an onion. We hadn't even got into the NCAA investigation, the whole thing with Connor Stallions. Wait till that hits. Woo! Now we're going to shift. We're going to talk about the Volunteers and Nico Iamaleava, or as I like to call him, Nico, I'm not about to leave you. One thing that we feel confident about is that we're in good shape at quarterback. I'm going to show you the 2023 numbers. I put together a chart to make it super easy rather than sit here and regurgitate numbers to you. I'm just going to show you. And you'll see where our problems are. And I'm also going to show you this first chart, which shows you our offensive output, which under a Josh Heupel offense, we've hit a number we haven't hit ever at UT, and he probably hasn't ever hit as a head coach. As a matter of fact, he's never hit as a head coach. All right, now on this chart, I have put a clue as to where the problem was in 2023. Now, let's see if you can figure out where that is. So anyway, going back to 2016, where he was the offensive coordinator at Missouri, his offense scored 31.4 points. Now, obviously, he wasn't in total control of it. There was a head coach there. Then the next year, they got some more control, and he went to 37.5 right here. Then he was the head coach at UCF. He went 43, 43, 42. Very consistent, top 10 in the country as far as offense. This little fella right here is one Jeremy Pruitt, the greatest offensive mind in football. He scored 21.5 points per game at UT, which is just charming. Then the very first season where our guy Heupel took over, it almost doubled to 39.3, which was 7th in the country. Then he went to 46.1, which is 1st in the country in 2022. And then we went crashing down to 31.8, a 15-point drop almost. And the last time he scored this few points, a Josh Heupel offense, was his very first year at Missouri as offensive coordinator when he scored 31.4. So if you hadn't figured out what the clue was, it's this giant red arrow right there. That's our problem last year. We're not going to win any championship scoring 31 points. I'll just go ahead and tell you. Not with the speed that we go out and not with our defense. Now, we're trying to improve our defense, and I'm going to talk to you about that too. But I've got another chart for you. It's going to show you the 2023 numbers, and I put some hints in that chart too to try to give you a little idea where the problem is. See if you can figure this one out. All right, this is the 2023 Vols defense and offense. All right, offense, you know we scored 31.8, which was 36 in the country. The year before we were first, by the way. Our scoring defense was 20.31, which is 22nd, which is not terrible. But the issue is our rushing defense was great. We were 19th in the country, but we were 3rd in the SEC. And by the way, we were within 1 yard of being first in the SEC. Had this been 112 yards, we would have been the top rushing defense in the SEC. Our rushing on the offensive side was 205 yards per game, first in the SEC. So now we need to determine where the problem is on defense and where the problem is on offense. And I'm hoping these clues will help you. Passing of 221 yards was 64th in the country as far as defense is concerned, which is pretty much horrendous. 64th. That's kind of a problem, especially when you've got almost the number one rushing defense in the SEC. Then you come over here to the offense and you see our passing offense was 50th in the country at 243. That's not going to get the job done. We cannot be 50th in passing in a Josh Heupel offense. That's not going to work.
I'd unfriend you.
That's not how it works. That's not how any of this works.
So Nico is now here, and we've seen already what he can bring as far as running the ball. I mean, he ran for 3 touchdowns. He actually passed the ball beautifully, even though he was running for his life, and he got sacked 6 times in that ball game, which is why I'm freaking out about our offensive line. We have got to get some key guys out of that portal, and we're working on a dude by the name of Zalance Hurd, who is a 5-star offensive tackle. He's ready to plug and play, but we're waiting on him to commit, and that's been very frustrating. We thought we had him in the boat, but not quite yet. We're watching it closely. Now, Nico would have had plenty of yards in that Citrus Bowl game, but he threw this 50-yard bomb that unfortunately our wide receiver lost in the sun. It was the prettiest pass you've ever seen, and he just stopped running, and the ball literally would have landed right here. It was a perfect pass. It was a dime. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So he didn't throw for a ton of yards, but he scored 4 touchdowns. He should have scored 5. And he was the number 1 player in the country in 2023 recruiting class. So we're all excited about Nico. I believe he will fix our passing problem, and I believe he'll fix our scoring problem. We scored 35 points in the ball game against a top 10 defense. And that was his very first ball game, which I've never seen a kid come out against a top 10 defense and score 4 touchdowns in his first game. I've never seen that happen. Now, you'll see some guy come out against Akron, you know, those guys that hit you low and try to take your knees out and your ankles. You remember them. Well, if you're playing Akron, you're going to score 10 touchdowns. But if you're playing a top 10 defense, you're not. Most quarterbacks, their first game, they crash and burn. That's just pretty normal. Ask Florida State how they did with their freshman quarterback. It was not pretty. And that's a whole different can of worms. That poor team, golly. It's tough when you lose your quarterback. It just is. But anyway, I think this is all fixable. Definitely the offense. I think we're pretty much fixing that. We do need some help with the offensive line. This passing defense is tragic, and I am sick of it. I'm really sick of it. Now, the entire secondary is gone that we had last year. 7 guys have transferred out or graduated. So we're bringing in a whole new batch. A bunch of them are freshmen and sophomore. They were 4-stars. And we brought in some transfer portal guys. I'm really hoping we can pick up somebody out of Alabama, especially when they're going through this transition. A lot of guys are entering the transfer portal, and they've got 30 days to do so. We need to pick up some additional help in that secondary. Those are the 2 places we need to spend money and time. Offensive line and defensive secondary. If we can fix those 2 issues, I think we can make a real run at the playoff. And then once we get in the playoff, we're going to be the most dangerous team up there, because when we're rolling and going fast the way we're supposed to with our offense, instead of sitting there waiting 20 seconds for the play to come in, that drove me nuts this year. When Hendon was doing it, it was just go, 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 go. Last year it was 18, 19, 20 seconds. Finally, you going to get the play into me? Okay. All right, guys, defense, are y'all all ready for us? Y'all set? Can we go now? We can? Thank you, defense. Okay, coach, the defense says it's okay. We can go now. Okay, here we go. Hike, give me a break. That drove me nuts this year. Why in the world we changed that, I don't get it. But hopefully we can go back to moving fast and catching defenses off guard like we did for 2 years. How'd that work out for us? Anyway, I wanted to talk about those 2 big issues, the Jim Harbaugh contract and, of course, my Vols. I think Nico will fix the offense. The defense, we'll see. We'll see what happens there. If we suck in the secondary again, we can forget about the playoff.
Playoffs? Don't talk about it. Playoffs? You kidding me? Playoffs?
So anyway, if you like this content, be sure to hit that like button. Let's continue to cover the SEC, my Vols, all these big stories. If you've not subscribed, it's on your right, my left. Just hit this little button right here. I'd appreciate it. Costs you nothing. Helps me out. And right over here is most recent video YouTube thinks you'll enjoy based on your viewing history. Be sure to check that one out. And we'll see you next time on Sports Talk Jay.